Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so I was listening to Stephen A. Smith's response to Rashad McCants, and then furthermore, Rashad McCants' response to Stephen A. Smith in regards to the GOAT conversation. And more or less, Rashad is Kobe's friend. I don't know to what, I don't know, I have no idea, but how that goes. But that's what Rashad was expressing to us. And Stephen A. was essentially saying that he has Kobe Bryant second all-time greatest shooting guard of all time, in the top 10 greatest players of all time, but the GOAT debate basically for him begins with Jordan Braun. And the thing about the word GOAT is it means greatest. So a lot of times we want to throw a million names in that conversation, but it can only be one. And that's the problem. And so I think Rashad's argument in defense of Kobe was you can't have this conversation without keeping Kobe in. And Shaq also was on Stephen A's show essentially saying, yeah, you got to keep my mans in there. But at the end of the day, the GOAT conversation is about one person. So while the conversation is fluid, it still has to come down to one. It's not a conversation that I feel I'm qualified to make. Everybody got their personal opinion, but the more I learn about the game, the less I feel qualified to speak. Situations, circumstances, the fluidity of a game, perspective. Based on me being a fan, the more I learn, the less I know. And that's what I'm starting to understand about the game of basketball. It's very fluid. Even some of the people who played the game, I listen to them speak, and then I listen to others and realize there's levels of understanding and different perspectives and different angles from which to watch the game to understand. And somebody can master one aspect of the game and be completely terrible at another. So to say, as a novice, someone who didn't play the game, even though I understand the game in my own way, based on my experience with the game, which dates back over 30 years, in various ways, such as playing it recreationally, hours and hours of obsessive hours playing 2K and NBA Live and NBA Jam over the years, which gave me an understanding of how to look at it from a perspective of how to strategize rosters and stuff like that, which is what I like to talk about a lot of times. You know what I mean? And of course, watching the game as a Laker fan obsessively the whole time since I was 9 years old. I'm learning things now at 39 years old that help me understand that what I was looking at wasn't what I was seeing in a lot of cases. That what I was assessing, I had more to understand to help me get to a point where I am right now, only further to learn. The one thing I knew was Kobe Bryant understood that. That's what I know. He understood that he was a student of the game. And even though he was literally better than everybody he played against, he was still someone that had more to learn. He was still somebody in year 16 and 17 going to Akeem Olajuwon looking for footwork practices. You know, going to various different players and still learning and teaching. And going to younger players and learning from them. Guys who had come into the league after him, he wanted to learn from them. So it's like, and when he got to a point where he had retired from the game, he was passing the game on to others. Guys like Jason Tatum and Kyrie Irving can attest to that. He took those guys under his wing and taught them aspects of the game that they use today. So for me, I don't know. The more I learn, the less I believe that I'm qualified to have this conversation. And to be honest with you, the more I learn that most are not. Most are not. Including players. Some of y'all who played the game are more qualified than me to have a conversation about GOAT conversations, but a lot of y'all haven't had the conversations about the perspective of the game that maybe you don't enter from or look at it from to know what else to incorporate into such a conversation. You ever heard the idea, damn, I never thought of that. Oh, wow, that's a breakthrough for me. There's a lot of guys who played this game at a high level who, when you listen to them, they haven't had that moment when it comes to certain aspects of the game that I pay attention to all the time. And I'm not even a player. You know what I mean? So, and they will tell me I'm not qualified to tell them that. And I would tell them, well, guess what? This is what I see. And maybe, just maybe, they'd be like, damn, I never thought of that. Because the game is a science that's ever evolving. And the more we see, the more we know there's more to learn. The more we see within that game, the more we understand that there's layers of the game that hasn't even been evolved through yet. And maybe the next generation is going to teach us something else. So what I'm here to tell you is I have a preference based on my limited understanding that's ever evolving. And when it comes to that GOAT conversation, and the one thing I'm learning is it's still being written, because one of the guys that is consensus greatest of all time is still playing. He's playing tonight. He'll be playing the Raptors tonight. So that's the problem with this conversation. Now we look at Kobe Bryant. You can see not only the totality of his career, but unfortunately for all of us, we see the totality of his experience on Earth. So there's a finite space from which to say, and this is what he brought to the game based on what we saw. But just like the Shaq conversation about where he played with Shaq for the first half of his career, there are other aspects of the conversation that needs to be incorporated into it to understand from a situational standpoint just where he actually ranked. And when the more you understand about how stats can be a little scurred by the fact that certain things don't tell the story. For example, I have an idea that guys like Anthony Davis and Christian Wood are better three-point shooters than their stats will tell you they are, based on their form, and when they do hit it, how often it looks sweet when it falls. I can argue they don't shoot enough of them, and because of it, when they do shoot, their percentages fall. Shooting at the end of the shot clock from a fall away angle or something like that, you do that 5 or 6 times and those are the only threes you shoot, your percentage is going to be bad. It's not like they're sitting out there with their set shot taking them 6 and 7 times a game to provide a good enough volume for their percentage to be relevant. I would argue their percentage is not relevant at all. But if you're only looking at statistics, then you would say they're bad three-point shooters. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, with that being the base from which to understand that stats may not always tell the story, and even that is arguable in and of itself, depending on who you're talking to and who could debate me in regards to it, it's too much to look at to really break it down to say, we have come to a conclusion that this person is the greatest player of all time. Because if stats can't tell the story, nobody's really qualified based on various different angles of the game that's still evolving. The science of it in and of itself hasn't completely been mastered by any damn body. Who's to say who's the GOAT? There's too much to account for. I don't trust a super machine to tell me the truth, because the super machine may not be able to take into account certain aspects of the conversation that has yet to be brought to the table. It's a complicated thing that boils down to people's preference and basic body of work from which we only know how partially to behold. Only partially fully know what the hell we're looking at and how best to assess what we're seeing. Now, a lot of people won't understand that about the game, especially novice people who are casuals who are just starting to watch the game. They listen to me talk and they think I'm out of my mind when I say this. But I'm telling you, I've obsessed over this game for 30 years and didn't even play it. And this is the conclusion I've come to. That it doesn't, your understanding of the game only evolves the more you learn. And those who are trying to judge the game are looking at it from a flawed math, from a flawed scale that is ever evolving in and of itself. They keep coming up with new stats every day. And mind you, we're basing it on one league. One league. There are leagues all over the world that we don't see nothing or know nothing of. Combinations of players and various different circumstances that ultimately play into one another. Theories that we write down as fact to say this is what, and because of it, this is what we know, when those theories can be debunked. As more basketball geniuses continue to speak about the game and teach us the game itself has not created itself fully. It's an art form. So that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. I know for a fact that Michael Jordan and LeBron James are considered the greatest players of all time. But we also only seen them in 1 or 2 scenarios based on the teams that they played for. You know, and I say 1 or 2 meaning several with LeBron. LeBron has played for several teams. Now, if he was on the same team with the same coach for the entire, duration of his career, what does that say for a guy who's had different coaches and different situations? See what I'm saying? Comparing him to Jordan. You haven't seen Jordan in many situations other than the ones that he was most comfortable in. Does he play the same way out of position? I can argue that the greatest player of all time should be able to do more than what he is not only asked to do, but more than what he should be able to do. You know what I mean? And what about the guy who could have been. Never got a chance to see how good he was because injuries stole the game from him. Now, if you're assessing him as the greatest player of all time, do you consider longevity? Is that fair? Could not a small sample size actually define the greatest? Or should it not be able to, based on volume? What about the guys who played too long? And we saw too much of them be worse for it. Maybe they fell off and was still in the league for a couple of years. Is that, there's a lot of different things that you cannot, you think you understand how to assess, but when you really learn that there's more to see based on different things that say, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. When you start realizing there's more of that going on in regards to the game, then you start to understand that maybe we're not assessing things properly at all. Maybe we need another 100 years of this to fully be able to behold who's the best. And I think that's kind of where we're at, to be completely honest with you. So, I don't think that the GOAT conversation holds much weight when you consider that there is so much that has yet to be considered. And while we can only do what we can in regards to seeing something and saying, this is what I see, everybody sees something different. Everybody's looking for something different. So that's what it really comes down to. My mom used to look at a basketball floor and pay attention to who's in position to rebound. Don't shoot that shot. There's no one down at the board. She taught me how to view the game that way just by viewing the game that way herself. When I played NBA 2K, I was always a point guard. So the way I see the game is to look for facilitators. Who's making who better? How can a shot be best created by the point guard? That's how I look at the game. I'm always a point guard. I'm always trying to create open looks and get rhythm passes and stuff like that off. What do I know about being a power forward? What do I know about being a center? You know what I'm saying? Look at the game a different way. Everybody has their own view from which to watch. Listening to Gilbert Arenas, he seems to have no belief in the value of a player like Jared Vanderbilt because Jared Vanderbilt can't score. I see a great deal of value for Vanderbilt, even when he doesn't score, because of how he can match up against defenders and make their shot more difficult. He can make a score in 106 and 103 and you walk away with a good offensive rating because he made their team so difficult, all of their shots so difficult, that your minimal amount of offensive effort was good enough to make yourself good for the game to be won. As to where if you go up against a team without a guy like that, you need to score 170 points because you don't have him down there disrupting the offense on the other side. So it's like, and who am I to say that Gilbert Arenas is wrong when he's arguably a Hall of Famer and I've never played the game? You see what I'm saying? So it's like I think I'm right. He thinks he's right. You think you're right. And I don't know that anybody's wrong. Because at the end of the day, this game continues to show us more and more each day. So that's what it really comes down to, man. I know I'm not qualified to say who the greatest player of all time was. I know that. I didn't see enough basketball. I didn't watch the totality of Michael Jordan's career. I saw the great majority of Kobe Bryant's career, with the exception of maybe 1 year where I had a job that didn't allow me to watch no games, and we sucked that year real bad. But 19 to 20 years. And I watched it through a lens that didn't understand the game as well as I'm learning to understand it now. I watched good playoff handfuls of Michael Jordan, occasional regular season games. I'm old enough to remember Mike in the playoffs, in the finals. What was I looking at? I don't know. I was a young kid. I didn't understand a game like that. So it's like LeBron James. I didn't watch much Cleveland. I didn't watch much Miami. I didn't like either of those teams, so I watched them only partially. I've gotten a chance to enjoy Bron now and in the finals and the playoffs every year. Other than that, I wasn't watching the fullness of LeBron James' career. My understanding of LeBron is after he got to the Lakers. Then I got a chance to see him every single day. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, what do I know? What can I really say? I've watched more basketball than maybe you have, but that doesn't mean that I saw enough to know the comparison data that would otherwise give me a confident answer as to say who's the greatest. I don't know. I think I know, but I also understand that I don't. Just the same. You know what I mean? I imagine you don't. It's confusing. And I think it's supposed to be, because at the end of the day, the story's still being written. And while some guys' careers are done, because there's new guys coming along, even their story isn't done. And that's pretty much what it is, man. And I think that's the argument that Stephen A was trying to make. And Rashad McCants didn't really appreciate that because he wants his guy to be in the conversation at all times. But there's going to be more guys coming. You understand what I'm saying? And if they surpass Michael Jordan's finals career and they surpassed LeBron James's longevity and personal accolades and scoring record, then one of them is going to be moved out of the way, or both of them get moved out of the way if two guys can come by and do it. You see what I'm saying? So it's like you're going to have to move people out the way. And though I don't appreciate you moving my guy out the way because he helped me to 5, 6, 7, 8 NBA Finals appearances, Kobe Bryant, at the end of the day, was it 7? It was 7. 5 rings, 7 championships, finals appearances. I think that's how that goes. Lost count. That's how much success Kobe had. So I can understand why anybody would want him in that conversation. He ended with 5. Yeah, 5. 1 less than MJ. 7 appearances in the finals. We lost to Detroit and Celtics. You had to get that right. But the point is, man, I watched a lot of Kobe Bryant, and for me, I still didn't have him as my GOAT. Because I watched so much Kobe Bryant, I was frustrated with some of Kobe Bryant's play at times. I watched him with a fine-tooth comb. I remember games where he was throwing the ball at the rim, not passing to teammates. And because I have this idea of being a point guard mentality facilitator, he used to drive me crazy not passing to teammates. I thought he made the game harder for himself a lot of the time. I really did. And sometimes his body was too tired to maybe work as hard on defense. I watched all of that. Seen thousands of Kobe games. So that's what it really comes down to. Sometimes when you watch a guy too much, you start seeing not only their strengths, but their weaknesses. You see so much of them to where you start wondering if there was somebody better because they made some mistakes that used to drive you nuts. And that was Kobe for me. But at the end of the day, he led us to so many successful situations, and he did the impossible so many times. Things that were just out-of-body experience type stuff, hitting shots that should not have been hit, and handling clutch moments in ways that were absolutely impossible. I have a hard time seeing anybody being more clutch than him in the history of the sport. I have a hard time with that. Does that make him the greatest of all time? I don't know. Maybe you think so. BDL 44. I thank you all for watching.